Flyana Boss ran TikTok in 2023. Literally. You couldn't open the app in 2023 without hearing, "Hello Christ, I'm about to sin again," and then seeing these two rappers running towards the camera with the facial tracking and zoom. They quickly gained a following on both TikTok and Twitter. And it's not hard to see why. They were easy to root for. They were two young girls hustling on the internet. They were going viral with consistency in bars and a visual style that to a lot of people was new. The song in those videos, "You Wish," became a breakout hit for the duo, currently sitting at over 50 million streams on Spotify, and earning a remix with fellow viral female rapper Callie and the legend Missy Elliott. It got them a spot on tour opening for Janelle Monáe, and the only reason it didn't get them a record deal is because they didn't need one. They already had one. They had signed to Atlantic Records 2 years before the virality. It seemed like the sky was the limit for them in 2023. But like a lot of artists who go viral on the internet, maintaining that attention has been a challenge. Atlantic still hasn't let them put out an album. And while they've put out music that people who liked You Wish would probably also like, they've had trouble replicating the success of that first viral hit. Life has also been getting in the way. One of the members had a baby in 2024. All of that culminated in people recently asking on Twitter, "Hey, whatever happened to these girls?" And one of the most popular responses to that tweet provided an answer that you might not have predicted. It wasn't that replicating viral success is hard, or that one member went through a pregnancy and now has a baby, or that they still hadn't dropped their album because being signed to a label is complicated. It was that people found out they were 30. It got to the point where they actually had to log on and clap back and clarify that they weren't actually 30. And while their actual age is unclear, they're likely to be somewhere in their mid to late 20s. The discourse started after their virality because in an interview they said they were in college listening to Ray Shremmerd. Me too, guys. To be fair, there are almost as many people on the internet defending them from the ageism as there are people making fun of them for it. But the discourse has left me fascinated with the concept of age in music. Something about that big three in the 10th place seems to scare the hell out of a lot of people. And you don't have to tell me twice. I have about 8 months left of my 20s personally. And as someone who also makes music, maybe music that some people would call young music, this is a topic that, is pretty relevant to my life. Is there an expiration date on making a certain type of music? What, if any, aspects of music should be reserved for people who still can't rent a car on their own? Or is the playing field different depending on what you're known for and how long you've been known for? What about on the listener side? Once you hit 25, is it time for jazz? Is there no more room for youthful music? If I listen to Netspend, am I going to end up on a watch list? Or is it just as simple as good music is good music, no matter how old the creator or the listener is? Let's get into all that, but first, if you like videos on music like this one, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. Being almost 30, I have about 8 months left to catch Anthony Fantano before they put me in a retirement home, so I've got a lot of work to do. But seriously, I post a video on music every week. If you want to see them early, you can go to my Instagram, HADJI, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post all my videos in that broadcast channel 1 day early for free. Also wanted to say thanks to everyone who's checked out my song Walk You Home from my group Elmjack. We have another song coming this month, A Bother, featuring Just End, dropping on March 19th, so stay tuned, it's gonna be super fire. Alright, back to the video. We gotta start by acknowledging that the idea of what's old in entertainment and the idea of what's old in real life are totally different. If you live in a country in the Western world, your life expectancy is likely to be around 80 years. People who are, so to speak, pushing 30 are barely a third into their lifespan on average. But show up on Twitter or TikTok and say that you're 29, and certain people might invite you to the unction, or post that one video of the old Kevin Garnett Nets highlights, or ask if you remember them from Miss Ishtar's irrigation class back in ancient Mesopotamia. It creates this interesting dichotomy for an artist in their mid to late 20s, because if they call themselves young around industry people or record label executives, they might get a scoff or a chuckle. But if they call themselves old around regular people, they're gonna get slapped upside the head. A pop singer named Lola Blanc acknowledged this in the first paragraph of a piece that she wrote for Vice back in 2015 called How Ageism Kills the Careers of Women in the Music Industry. There's a part of me that's terrified to write this. I'm a singer and a songwriter, and as a female who's not yet a household name, I can't help but feel the familiar, deep-seated fear that being open about this fact will lead to my professional demise. I'm fighting it. Here goes. I'm 27. In the article, Lola goes on to detail things that she's heard from managers and other people in the industry, like, "You don't have a lot of time here." Or, you have a limited window of time, right? This article was written in 2015, and perhaps Lola today is celebrating the success of someone like Charli XCX, who had one of the biggest runs of any pop girl in 2024 with her Brat era, and she was 31 going on 32 for that. Perhaps things have shifted a bit since 2015, thanks to the ageless power of the algorithm. And you know what? Lola herself put out her biggest song in 2019 when she would have been over the age of 30. Her song Angry 2 has over 80 million streams today, so good for her. The truth is, plenty of artists don't find their place in today's music industry until they're already past the age that the suits and the Twitter trolls alike would call young. Breaking through as a musician isn't like graduating high school, where everybody seems to do it mostly around the same age. Some artists like Justin Bieber break through at the age of 14. Others, like the late Charles Bradley, don't get their big break until they're in their 50s. And most artists fall somewhere in between those two. An artist's place in the industry in terms of their veteran status doesn't always align with how old they are. Here's a fun example. Soulja Boy's first hit, Crank That, came out in 2007. The first time anyone had heard of New York rapper Fivio Foreign was on the song Big Drip in 2019. You may be surprised to learn that Soulja Boy and Fivio Foreign were both born in 1990. It makes a little more sense when you think about it. Soulja Boy popped while he was only 16 years old, while Fivio grinded for years in New York before he caught some heat with the drill scene. But still, for an artist like Soulja Boy, he's had a full span of a career behind him, ranging from more commercial albums, big hits, weirder underground internet stuff, video game consoles. Like, he's pretty much done it all. With Fivio, he just got out of his first major label deal, he's only dropped 2 or 3 projects, and now he seems to spend his time convincing us that he is the real Plackboy Max. They're in totally different points of their careers, and it would make more sense to analyze them from a perspective that included the context of what they've done so far in their career rather than just being like, this guy is 35. Here's maybe a more directly comparable one. Tyler, the Creator, was born in 1991, and his tour mate and collaborator Tizo Touchdown was born in 1992. Tizo is considered to be a new artist, and he's somebody who broke out in that immediate post-pandemic era. Maybe it's the nails or the hair. What is it, the nails? Or his general youthful vibe and aesthetic? But a lot of people are surprised to learn that Tizo is a little bit older than they might have guessed. He and Tyler are almost the same age, and yet nobody would expect them to be delivering the same kind of thing right now. Tyler's first major label studio album was released in 2011, and his real breakout project, Bastard, came out in 2009. Tizo's first major label album came out in 2023. Tyler is playing with house money at this point in his career. He's at no risk of losing his established place in the music world. If anything, he's just trying to run up the score to make a better case to being like the Mount Rushmore of hip-hop artists of his era. Tizo, on the other hand, I'm assuming is working on his sophomore album, which is really a make or break moment for an artist. And he's still in the relatively early stages of telling us who he is, what he stands for, the life that he's lived so far. For Tyler, it's a lot different. People are going into his newer projects expecting him to be developing as a person and changing, and stuff that you might expect to hear from a 33-year-old. If he popped out making music like, I'm drinking every night, I started wearing less and going out more, people would be like, this is a midlife crisis, or maybe like a third life crisis, you know? I don't know if it would be perceived that way for Tizo Touchdown, whether that's fair or not. There are plenty of artists like Tizo where maybe it just takes a little bit longer for them to break through. And for those where it does happen a little bit later than usual, the age number can become a pretty big insecurity. A British artist named Paloma Faith, who had a big hit in 2014 with Only Love Can Hurt Like This, explicitly lied about her age in the beginning of her career, and she opened up about that in 2021. I always knew that my age was going to be an issue, especially as a female artist. I was 27 when I put my first record out, but I told my label I was 23. I looked quite young, so I could get away with it. I read a lot of articles about musicians at the time, and it seemed like every piece about KT Tunstall would imply that she was quite old, even though she was only 27. That really affected me, and I remember thinking, I want to be judged for my music, not my age. Not every late 20-something is treated equally. A lot can be controlled for image and marketing. The critique that we see about Flyana Boss isn't necessarily that they're pushing 30, it's that they're pushing 30 and making the music that they make, doing what they do in their videos, dressing how they dress. Is that a valid critique for Flyana Boss? To me, not really. I think the one thing that gets pointed out in their lyrics a lot is, I said I love you to that man, but I'm not feeling him. But is everyone in their mid-20s at their best in communication and relationships? Not really. Plenty of people are still playing games. I'm not condoning it, it's just a fact. I don't think it's super mature, but it seems pretty nitpicky to be like, they can't be 28 saying that. Image-wise, perhaps it's the elf ears and the colorful outfits that made people think they were younger than they actually were. And they look young, so I do get that. But I'm also not sure I'm following that fully either. Do elves die at the age of 19? Like, they don't make it to their 30s? I actually spent a good amount of time Googling elves for this video, and the ones in Lord of the Rings are actually immortal unless somebody like kills them, you know, like they're not gonna die of old age. So there's no reason why there couldn't be like a 30-year-old elf rapping. You know what I'm saying? None of these things are inherently young. You might argue they're inherently fun, or carefree, or whimsical, or silly, or colorful. And perhaps all of those adjectives are associated with youth. And of course, there's a reason why people want to get in on that youthful energy. It's one of the most reliable selling tactics, not just in music, but in everything. For one, it's perceived to be relatable to the 18 to 25 demographic, who are so sought after by marketers and labels and the powers that be, because they're deemed to be the most impressionable, at least in terms of groups that have spending money. With the way old people are falling for AI slop on Facebook, I'm starting to question that logic, but I do see where they're coming from. There is an incentive for artists, both old and young, to appear youthful and zeitgeisty, because plain and simple, it sells. Some artists are hyper aware of both the allure of being youthful and carefree, and the drawbacks of being spotted hanging out at the party a little bit too long, like that one super senior who didn't go away to college. My favorite example of this is Ken Carson, who had an EP called Teen X in 2020. The EP released the same year he turned 20, but I guess conceivably he could have made most of the songs, if not all the songs on Teen X, while he was still 19, thus a teenager. Ken picked a pretty catchy nickname for himself. It was influential enough for his label boss, Playboi Carti, to name an entire song, Teen X, on his album Whole Lotta Red later that year. Ken referred to it a few more times while he was 20 or 21, most memorably on the song Teen Bean, when he said, "She like, ain't you Ken Carson, ain't you Teen X?" But at some point, Ken must have come to the sobering conclusion that he could no longer call himself Teen X if he wasn't literally a teen. So in 2022, he dropped an album called X, and on the track title, his first line is, "Ain't no Teen X no more, it's just X." And then later on his most recent album, A Great Chaos, he refers back to that "Ain't you Ken Carson, ain't you Teen X" line from Teen Bean, but instead says, "She like, ain't you Ken Carson, ain't you X?" If you think about it, Ken Carson was actually the first entity to rename itself X, because Twitter didn't do it until 2023. This also might be the deepest dive that anyone's ever done on Ken Carson lyrics, but that's just the type of shit that you get up to when you're young, lit, and 29 like me. One of the more common rapper prefixes is young, whether it be Jeezy, Thug, M.A., Dolph, rest in peace, Boy Never Broke Again. Jeezy, who is currently 47, made the decision to drop Young from his name around 2010, when he was 32 years old. When he first started rapping, he might have been Young Jeezy. But by 2010, that was just Jeezy, you know? Young Thug is actually right around that age now, but he might have bigger fish to fry than worrying about what his name is. I do kind of wonder how long he's gonna be Young Thug for. NBA Youngboy, still somehow only 25, so he might be NBA Youngboy for a minute. The Lil prefix in rap is one of the more ambivalent ones, because they could be Lil because they're young, but they also could be Lil just because they're Lil, like just because they're short or small or diminutive in some way, you know what I mean? Bow Wow dropped the Lil from his name in 2002, telling MTV, "I changed my name because I'm getting older now and it's too many Lils." But he was literally a child when he was Lil Bow Wow, so I think that example is kind of an outlier. There are plenty of grown man rappers who are Lil something, you know, Lil Wayne. But to me, that kind of falls in the same category as being a junior. You know, like Ken Griffey Jr., Robert Downey Jr., RFK Jr., something like that. It just implies that there was a bigger and older version of you at some point, so you had to be the Lil them. You don't drop Junior when you get older. I mean, Junior Soprano was a junior until he was in his 80s. Forget about names for a second. I don't think that there's a set age where an artist has to stop talking about something because they're too old for it. Juicy J's hit single Bands Make Her Dance, where he says, "You say no to ratchet, Juicy J can't," came out when he was 37. But I don't think there were that many people who were like, "Man, come on, get out of the club, go coach a high school football team." Drake is around that same age now, and he does get criticism from people for not maturing enough in his lyrics. I think he's an artist who, because he has so many pockets and so many bags, so many different things he's done across his career, whenever he drops a project, there will always be a disappointed cohort because they wanted more this Drake or more that Drake, and what they got was a different Drake that they weren't necessarily hitching their wagon to. But I actually thought on his most recent project, Some Sexy Songs for You, at least on the outro Greedy, which is one of my favorite songs, I can hear him getting a little more mature in his assessment of his own relationships. Can't imagine how it feels to be in love with me for real. When I disappear for days, you convince yourself you're to blame. It feels like an honest acceptance of some of his flaws. Compare that to another R&B classic Drake song that's like a late track on an album, Fire and Desire from Views, which is about a decade old now, which is kind of crazy to think about. He said, "I ask you what I need, you say a guarantee. I mean, you say that like it's easy." It sounds like a girl just wanted a little bit of a commitment, and he avoided it, but he didn't take responsibility for it. So I actually do see some growth from Fire and Desire to Greedy, so I want to give Drake some props. But it is a reminder, you know, that maturation is going to look different for different artists, because they're all in different contexts. They're all coming from different places, starting here and ending up here. And so depending on where they start, where they end up might look totally different. Drake still does make some music for the club, and some people get on him for that. saying he's too old for it. But interestingly, I don't remember as much complaining about Juicy J or an artist like 2 Chainz, who, when he was dominating, making his most popular music, he was in his mid to late 30s. Fabio was pushing 30, making songs with a 19-year-old, 20-year-old Pop Smoke. And nobody said anything about it because they had amazing chemistry musically and they seemed to have a genuine friendship and relationship outside of music. It feels selective, we decide whether we like the product first, and then if we don't like it, we use the age as the vehicle to complain about it. This part of the conversation makes me want to revisit that Lola article about being a 27-year-old pop girl. There is an aspect of sexism in this age argument, and I think it's worth taking a deeper look at. We talked about the Jeezys, the Drakes, the 2 Chainzes of the world. If a male rapper broke out in their early 30s, you think they would receive as much pushback as a 27-year-old girl in a record label meeting? I don't think so. When the industry sells female artists, their ideal way of doing so is focusing on beauty. And if they sign an artist at 27 instead of 22, they theoretically would have less years to exploit that beauty because they don't know how the artist is going to age. I think this is bullshit. This is not something that I co-sign. And to be honest, there are plenty of examples that go against that. SZA is in her mid-30s, and she's never been more popular than she is right now, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And as someone who understands the power of marketing, and I do enjoy looking at it and breaking it down sometimes, at the end of the day, I want the music industry to be a meritocracy. I want it to be about who makes the best music and not who makes the best Super Bowl commercial to sell the music. I can see that seep into the complaints about Flyana Boss. In 2023, they were probably like 26. Bossman D-Lo is 26. Is anyone telling him that he's too old to be doing what he's doing? No. So there definitely is an aspect of sexism in this argument. The reality is, we shouldn't be telling Bossman D-Lo or Flyana Boss that they're too old to be doing what they're doing, at least in my opinion. The fact that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to age and maturity and expectations is why the type of ageism that we see with Flyana Boss is so silly. They are new artists, they are still young, and they're still giving us some of their earliest ideas. Why does them being closer to 30 than 20 take away any of the enjoyment from it? Outside of music, there's an argument that in our society, our timeline for success and leaving the nest is getting pushed further and further back. According to urban.org, the average age that someone's moved out of their parents' house has pushed back from 23 in the 90s to 26 or 27 now. There are a lot of reasons for this, the most likely being that it's less and less realistic for adults in their mid-20s to be capable of buying a home financially. There's the aspect of dating and less people getting married at that age now, especially in like big cities. So couple that with this pushback on people's timelines, and then add in, these growth stunting events like the 2020 global pandemic, and it's no wonder that people in their mid to late 20s are still saying I love you to that man but not feeling him. That post-college getting your life together purgatory has expanded. What's really interesting to me is you look at these statistics that show you that people are more and more likely to be in their mid to late 20s living like they are in their early to mid 20s, and from there you might expect that they would want artists that they could relate to in that aspect. And to be fair, a lot of people probably do find Flyana Boss to be very relatable, and we're really just looking at the bitterest slice of the conversation in this video. But it's hard to imagine anyone in their 30s or anyone in their early 20s hating on Flyana Boss for being 28. It feels like most of this vitriol is coming from people who are their age. And I think a pretty decent chunk of this discourse is most likely coming from projection. People are frustrated with feeling stuck in their mid to late 20s, wanting to level up in life, but economic situations, global pandemics, things like that are getting in the way of it. So they take it out on these 2 rapper girls online. What I find super interesting about this critique is that it only seems to apply to people who are in their mid to late 20s, or maybe their early 30s, who may have just outgrown the age for it to be socially acceptable for them to be making music and promoting it in the way that they are. On the other end of the spectrum, when old people are doing it, it seems to be celebrated more. When I think about Pete and Boss, a British rap duo of these like 70-something-year-old white guys, most of the comments are super supportive of them. Perhaps it's treated like a bit of a gimmick. It's not put in the same category as the other British rappers. They're not about to be in the studio with Lancey Foe and Fimi Guerrero, but I think the average reaction to them is more positive than it is to artists in their late 20s or early 30s still trying to make it. I've seen a version of this in my own career with my project Elmjack. My friend Rome and I decided to use our dads as the face of the project. We've dropped our first 2 tracks and we have a 3rd one coming out later this month. On TikTok, we post things like, "Am I too old to start a band?" And people in the comments are unbelievably supportive. This isn't just a gimmick to us or something that we just made up to go viral. Rome and I are building out a whole world with this Elm Jack thing, and this is kind of just the first phase of it. You just got to stick around and see what we're doing. But the funny thing is, one of the reasons why we were motivated to do it in the first place is because as 29-year-olds, we feel old in music. Like when you turn that camera on, when you promote yourself on TikTok, when you do all that kind of stuff, and you're up against these 18-year-old kids, like I feel the way that my dad looks in that video. And what I'm most curious about is the listener. How does learning the age of an artist affect the way that you consume the music, if it does at all? I work at a high school, and I also take advantage of the gym in the high school and work out so that I can get, if you couldn't tell, y'all can tell, right? And I was down there listening to the Nets Band album one day, and I thought it was really funny that I was listening to a rapper who is genuinely younger than some of my students. But at the end of the day, to me, good music is good music. Age might affect the way artists are marketed to you, or maybe if they're marketed to you at all. But I feel like for me, when I listen to something new, there's a couple different categories I can place it in. It's like, I like this, I think this is good, but it's not something I'm gonna listen to every day. Or there's stuff that I'm gonna put in my rotation because it inspires me, it bangs, I enjoy listening to it, And then there's stuff that's just ass. But I don't think the age aspect ever plays a negative role for me. If I listen to a younger artist, they have the room to impress me, and I'm like, damn, there's no way this kid is only 17. But also, if it's missing something, if it's not fully there yet, age is a great crutch, because you'll be like, damn, this kid is still better than I was then. And when they really start to figure it out, if they keep working at it, they're gonna be hella fire. And if they're a bit older, I don't think that negatively affects me at all. Maybe it's my own perspective of being a 20-something for a couple more months, still trying to make it in music. But when I see an artist that gets to me and has a youthful image, but they're like 29 or they're like 32, then I actually applaud them because I think it's sick that they push through, because I know how much BS you had to push through to get there. What do you guys think? Does the age of an artist affect the way that you listen to them? Let me know in the comments. And also, let me know what you want me to cover next. Peace.